There is a question, how do you eat an elephant? Answer, bite at a time. I'd be interested in where you start eating and where you finish up. The steps that you think you need to take in making a transformation from perhaps a post-industrial city to a sort of Renaissance city.
Well, that's a nice, easy question.
Where do you start is the question.
I think we start at both ends. We start with the project and we start with the general plan. I really think we have to commute, to go up and down between scales in urban planning. So if you don't want to start because you want to have a general vision first, then things don't happen. If you start with projects, introducing projects and neglect having a kind of framework, then after a while you're working footloose. So to turn your question in a more general way, I think in urban planning it's very much important to go up and down between scales.
I'd like to add the horizontal view on it, but I think in addition to what you said, with which I agree, you also have to swap between actors. You have to have, be it simultaneously, be it alternatively, the official planning institutions, but also the public, the stakeholders, doing their job, having the initiative, reacting on others' initiatives, and so on. So let's look at this like a grid of vertical questions of scale and horizontal questions of actors in the field of urban development.
Je pense qu'avant, on pensait qu'il y avait la stratégie, puis la planification, puis le projet.
I think before we used to think there was a strategy, then planning, then the project.
Aujourd'hui, on constate que ça ne marche plus.
And we realise today that this no longer works.
Parce qu'on ne maîtrise plus le temps.
We're not able to master time as well.
Donc cette rationalité, elle ne marche pas.
So this way of working no longer works.
Donc ça devient horizontal. Et dans le même moment, il faut penser stratégie, avoir des projets, des grands, des petits, mais que c'est simultané.
So now we have to look at strategy and small and large projects all at the same time and in a horizontal fashion.
Je pense qu'il y a une crise de la planification.
There is a crisis in urban planning.
Okay, more question. Thank you.
But having said that, maybe we should learn French, by the way, it's much nicer.
We all three speak French.
But having said that, what I've seen today, let's say three people who are, I think, as you said, Chris, very much involved in the city for a long time. How important is it then that there's also this commitment of people for a very long time to this kind of, maybe not a plan, but an attitude for the city? Continuity, I think, I suppose, is very important when you say that it's, up and down and horizontal, vertical, etc. I mean, how important is it that you find people in the city which are really there for many years and also have this big vision and also hold on it?
I guess I'd perhaps just add to that, maybe one of the great advantages of being a second city is that they're sufficiently big and that people are very committed to those places to want to stay.
Indeed, that's true. Definitely, in addition to the cities to move from our place, they tried to get into Berlin. I tested that, and I decided to stay. So finally, I'm working with the city of Hamburg since 25 years, and I personally appreciate this. don't know what others think, but I think it gives you a certain credibility also as a planner. And in turn, you really have lived with the city and have seen those milestones in development. I try to show you. Nevertheless, it's important to make yourself conscious of this historical line from time to time, and this is, as I said, a chance of this conference. Looking back, looking at the milestones and understanding better the way behind you for designing the way in the future.
J'ai remarqué qu'il faut 25 ans pour qu'une idée passe dans la vie.
I've noticed that it takes 25 years for an idea to come to fruition.
J'ai remarqué aussi que, et c'est la chance de Lyon, c'est que la taille est juste. On voit le lien entre ce que l'idée et l'action.
Also, we've got the benefit that it's of the right size, and we can see from the idea right through to the creation.
L'agglomération n'est pas trop grande, 1 million, 1,5 million. L'administration n'est pas trop puissante. Et donc, on peut passer de l'idée à l'action assez vite, 4-5 ans.
The greater Lyon area has 1.5 million people, and the government is quite small, relatively small, which means that you can have, you can see an idea go from an idea to something concrete quite quickly.
Donc, je pense qu'il y a toujours une taille juste pour faire des choses. Pas trop petit, pas trop grand. Il faut la trouver.
There's always a right size. It's not too big, not too small. You just have to find that balance.
Yeah, I'd like to add my nuancating your remark about continuity, because you should know my job is temporary. So I'm only there for 5 years. So I think...
but it's not one that exists. Your job exists.
Yeah, my job exists.
But that's important.
Yes. Yeah, but still I think it's, of course it's quite clear in some cities there is a kind of chemistry between persons too. So the issue of who are the persons who are working there, that's always very important, or in the case of Antwerp. I'm also much intrigued by, because even if the persons change, sometimes you have this kind of culture that remains. In the case of Antwerp, we had a competition in 1993 with a plan for the Little Ireland Fort in the north by Manuel de Solomon. We are still working in the same tradition as the original plan. And in 20 years, many persons have changed. So sometimes in the city there is a kind of current or culture that produces continuities. And I'm very much, it's very easy, it's not very tangible. I'm very much intrigued by knowing how to produce this kind of continuity in that way, because if you would know that, then you have that. John.
Thank you. One of the objects of this evening is to sort of for each country to learn from each other. And Peter Drummond, when he started, made some remarks about the direction we're taking in this country. One of the things that's happening here is a greater and greater involvement of central government in local affairs. And the central government has even recently taken the power to take planning away from local authorities considered a favour. And I wondered if the three of you could each give us an impression of how far central government has been involved in what we do. How we're built and how we're doing it.
La décentralisation en France, c'est 1983, il y a 30 ans.
Decentralization in France happened in 1983, so 30 years ago.
Donc aujourd'hui, l'État n'existe plus dans l'urbanisme, sauf pour les autoroutes.
So the state no longer intervenes in urban planning apart from motorways.
Donc il y a une vraie autonomie de ce point de vue-là et une vraie liberté de création.
So there's now cities can act completely individually, and they're given quite a bit of freedom and creativity.
Well, it's, I don't know, since when, but for a very long time, in the sense of having the legal right to make their own statutory plans. The cities in Germany are independent autonomous too, but, of course, on the one hand, plans are worth not much as long as you can realize them, and in this sense, we very much depend on federal money, especially in the field of urban rehabilitation. The newly built projects of the 60s and 70s have followed other financial rules, but today, as we found out, the conversion of the cities and the reinventing of the cities this is very much to do with promoting building activity where there are only but basically federal resources needed, and there's a certain indirect influence, especially when there are cuts. You know, as long as the money is there, it is wonderful, but only recently these things have been cut severely, and there's been an indirect negative influence of the federal policy.
Yeah, in Belgium too, there is autonomy of the city towards a higher government or federal and regional government in urban planning, especially also on the juridical and administrative level. So we are giving our building permits ourselves, we're making plans ourselves. But there is financial dependency, especially in the field of the large mobility infrastructure. So there is the highway going through Antwerp, and the city wants to do something else with the highway than the federal government. And that's really a struggle. That's perfectly.
So the question back there.
Thanks. While we're all part of Europe, you're from three very different, well, three different cultures, and we're from a different culture in this room as well, probably more than one. So I'm interested, is there anything that you've heard from each other that's learning for you about each of your different cities?
Well, in fact, we're from different parts of Europe, but we're all from Europe. So what I've seen during the presentations in all cases, for instance, in the Haven City and in the Confluence project, as in our case in the airline, that's really about urban design now, is that we all try to innovate the typology of the urban block. So what I'm looking at when I saw the drawings of Haven City and Confluence, I'm immediately looking at how do they do that, this kind of new semi-open urban block. That's really the typology of the building stone, or how do you call it, the elementary part of making the urban tissue of the European city. And we have to do something else now than we did in the 19th century. So I see, in fact, more comparison in the research, in the investigation, than difference.
I'd like to answer Lara from the practical point of view, how actually learning takes place and could and should take place. Well, first, traveling. For about 10 years, I organized every year an excursion, a one-week excursion to a European city, among which Lyon has already been. Antwerp, I'm afraid not. Next to be visited. Secondly, by inviting European architects to our domestic competitions. Hamburg too is a city where architectural competitions have high appreciation. And thirdly, and not lastly, of course, by going ourselves to these cities, not rather to visit, but to speak. Of course, this is dependent on the situation, but in recent years I've been traveling a lot through Europe as a speaker on conferences, sharing our experiences, speaking on Hamburg and listening to others.
Je pense que les villes d'Anvers, d'Hambourg, ou les villes d'Angleterre, elles sont beaucoup plus ouvertes sur le partenariat privé.
I think that Hamburg and Antwerp and UK cities cities are a lot more open to private partnerships.
Je pense beaucoup plus facilement ouverte vers la modernité, vers l'innovation.
They're a lot more open to innovation and new ideas.
Nous sommes tenus, je crois, par le modèle de la ville italienne.
I think that we have tended to stick to the Italian model of the city.
On a une culture patrimoniale qui est forte, je crois qu'il nous vient d'Italie, vraiment.
And we have a strong heritage, which probably comes from Italy as well.
Alors c'est bien, mais nous tire un peu. Alors il faut se sortir et s'ouvrir davantage. C'est vraiment le progrès qu'on doit faire et les deux villes d'Anvers et de Hambourg le montrent.
So this heritage is actually holding us back a bit, and we need to be a bit more open, like Antwerp and Hamburg, to new ideas and new influences.
On est entre nord et sud.
We're between north and south.
Bob, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, come to you next, Bob.
The reason there for a settlement for the three cities seems to be that of waterfront and trade. Should we as planners be thinking of that there needs to be a reservation for the future of trade along our waterfronts and wharfages? It seems that London has lost most of its frontages, river frontages to privatisation, and you might say civilisation, but loss of trade. Is that a problem do you think we're exploring out for the future when other forms of trade may need to come back to the riverfront? And the second question is about land ownership, because Antwerp and Hamburg, you said how significant the pattern of land ownership was. And I wondered if Leon could have a comment about land ownership, and if the three of you could comment about how influential land ownership has been to the history of your lowlands.
So two questions there. I think the first one about, given that you're now bringing development to the waterfront, to what extent are you thinking about the way in which the waterfront might need to re-establish its function to trade at some point in the future? Is that an issue? And then the second question about land ownership, particularly what is the structure of land ownership in Lyon, but then a more general question about the importance of land ownership to your approach to planning.
Yeah, in the case of Antwerp, the seaport is moving downstream. In a way, that's a pity, because it means the port has left the city. It's not more any present more in the city. So, for instance, in the refurbishment plan for the quays, what we want to do is to keep the quay wall usable for mooring ships. Sometimes it's necessary because there is not enough place at the port. Sometimes they just park a ship over there. That's a magnificent moment, because then suddenly in the city you have a huge scale of a sea ship that is right next to the cathedral. So that's one thing, but that's not really about keeping trade over there. So perhaps what might be an answer to your question is that what we see in Antwerp is we don't use the central port area anymore for sea ships. But then we could reuse the quays for not pleasure, but the ships that use the rivers for instance, for contracting materials and these kind of things, for city distribution of goods. So that might be a new function, still linked to river transport, that could still be present in the middle of the city.
Well, as I already mentioned, this change of demand on the physical structures of port areas and representation, and despite this, in the situation of Hamburg, we have opposite the inner city area, opposite the north banks of the main branch of the Elbe. There's a south branch too, but what is normally considered to be our river is the northern branch. And it's got this northern banks where the city center lies, where parts of the port used to be, but are converted or in conversion now, half the city and that's of course opposite, we have still the operating port close to the city that poses enormous questions and really challenges the development, for instance, for half the city in terms of noise at night. But still we have, in this sense, this atmosphere, this maritime atmosphere right in the city, and it even grows in recent years as cruise activity. The coming in of big cruise ferries is growing, and of course these cruise terminals are established on the northern banks with short links to the city to touristic destinations, etc.
Pendant des siècles, la ville a lutté contre les inondations des deux fleuves.
For centuries, the city struggled to keep flooding under control.
Qui amenaient des maladies, donc ils ont été vécus comme néfastes.
They brought illnesses and disease, and they were obviously seen as a very negative thing.
Et puis la Saône a été apprivoisée et elle est devenue le cœur même de la ville pendant plusieurs autres siècles.
And then the Saône was adopted, and it became the focal point for the city centre.
Et puis on a trouvé les quais, grâce à la construction des quais au XVIIIe, on a mis hors d'eau toute la ville.
And thanks to the construction of the dock area, the whole city was lifted out of watery area.
Et puis le chemin de fer inventé ici a tué la batellerie. La batellerie, la navigation.
And then railways came along and they killed the water trade.
Donc aujourd'hui, il n'y a plus d'utilité pour les fleuves, donc ils ont un rôle plus symbolique qu'autre chose.
And now rivers are not less useful and they're more than symbol.
Donc c'est plus une réconciliation avec les fleuves que la recherche d'une utilité, d'une économie de transport.
And so now we're all looking at the rivers for pleasant leisure activities and for trade.
François, can you say something about land ownership in the
is it the banks or
no, just within the city in total? How does land ownership affect your approach to planning?
C'est au privé, c'est le privé, sauf les propriétés publiques, sont les écoles, les hôpitaux, et les 80% du sol appartient à des propriétaires privés.
So 80% is privately owned. The only buildings that aren't would be public service buildings like hospitals and schools.
This is a bit different in Hamburg, as the city follows since a very long time, since decades, a little policy of land management, of buying up land, selling land, and stocking land. And so I think an average of 40% of the city's territory is being owned by the city, not including the port, that is totally owned by the city, the land of the port. It's only be let to the users and not sold. And I think this helps very much steering the city's development, in addition to developing such plans. And I can really talk on this as I mentioned in my bio, and since a number of years, one of the two Senate representatives in the beyond that political commission, parliamentary commission on real estate and land. So for an insight on what's going on here, and I'm quite glad that we have this tradition, this culture, and this practice. To mention Berlin, they in turn envy Hamburg quite a lot about this tool of steering the city's development.
We know it's very different.
Yeah, it's completely the opposite. So I think the city is owning hardly any land apart from the land where all the public buildings are built on. And then, in fact, there is a double effect in Belgium. Land ownership is very much fragmented. So the housing market in Belgium is hardly a rental market. And more than 70% of the people in Belgium own the house in which they live. So moreover, the private ownership is very much fragmented.
But it's very interesting to note that there is still a willingness to intervene in the market. For example, with your investor housing scheme, you would not find this administrations in this country intervening in the market, perhaps to such extent. Bob, final question. So that'll be a good one.
The Academy is concerned about three aspects, particularly that we define: space, place, and life. We're very comfortable with space and place. The Council of Europe last year commented on the situation across Europe arising from the recession, and particularly the way in which the tax base and the social welfare tax base in different European countries was impacting differentially, particularly badly, I think, in the German lending, because as values fell, the local ability to raise revenues to support the unemployed and people in need was also reducing. That's not the case in the UK. I'm interested to know how you think now the recession is affecting your hopes and fears for your vision and your plans.
That's a good question. That was a good question.
Need more time.
Slow evidence, doesn't it?
Yeah. So you know, from the Netherlands, I get one question a week to come and visit Antwerp. So that's because our economical or our real estate system is entirely the opposite. We have the slow urbanism system, they have a fast urbanism system. The advantage of a slow urbanism system or slow urbanism condition is, for instance, we never had a real estate bubble in Belgium. We never had this kind of steep recession. We don't have developers going broke as in the Netherlands. We don't even know about architecture offices that are closing down. We have a recession, but because our peaks were never so high, now we're not going down to even neither. So that's one advantage. But still, of course, recession time is a challenge. That's the moment when you also have time to think and to reflect and to change the way you work. We want, in a way, in fact, we want to refine what we're doing. I could be very pretentious and say, well, we are in fact now more learning to, for instance, the Netherlands, perhaps part of the UK, how to avoid this kind of recession due to real estate growth.
We're cooking now, you're still growing, I believe.
I find it hard to speak on recession and etc. on general economic terms. I'm not an economist, so I think the question was targeting especially the real estate, the economy, and regarding this, of course we have that slump in the years 28, 1929, and that hit hard, especially the preparation of the International Building Exhibition, where we tried to make the rest of an area that didn't exist on the map of the real estate economy. But talking of today, we really actually fear a real estate bubble. Prices are extremely growing, both on rents and on land prices to be sold, and the houses are shorter than ever. We try to cope with this by really pushing, not slow but fast, the production of houses, especially affordable houses, as that is this dynamism at the moment. So this is rather not a question of today.
Il n'y a pas longtemps, je suis allé à la conférence des maires des grandes villes de France.
I recently went to the conference with the mayors of French towns.
Toutes les villes françaises ont une gestion saine.
Every every French town has a good management.
Mais elles baissent de 10 à 20% dès cette année leurs investissements.
But they are reducing their investments by 10 to 20% this year.
Et même les villes qui marchent bien comme Lyon, par exemple, qui est une ville riche, déjà ça commence et c'est pas fini.
Even a rich town, a city like Lyon, is lessening their investment and is continuing to do so.
Alors comment faire? C'est faire avec moins, aussi bien avec moins d'argent. Avec moins.
Oh, right. It's done with less money.
Je pense qu'on quitte le luxe. On a été dans un luxe financier pour faire les villes ces 20 dernières années.
We're leaving an era of luxury, which we've been in the last few years when it comes to urban planning.
Alors comment être inventif et continuer à faire la ville, mais avec moins?
So how do you continue to be inventive, but do it with less money?
Et deuxièmement, faire avec ce que l'on a. Donc c'est plus la question de la gestion urbaine, je pense, qui va devenir une politique d'urbanisme ces prochaines années.
So we basically have to look at how we can make do with what we have, and that's going to lead the urban planning going forward.
Et c'est une situation tout à fait nouvelle qui démarre maintenant pour les villes françaises en tout cas.
This is a new situation for French towns at the moment.
Well, I'm not going to take any more questions. All that depressing talk about recession, well, there is a bar. I really now want to just propose some thanks, really. Thanks to Elise, who's done a fantastic job with that. Thanks to Linda, Stephen, and the team at the Academy of Urbanism. Thanks again to BDP for hosting us here. But the biggest thanks are for these three gentlemen who've come all the way from Antwerp, Hamburg, and Lyon, and as they did when we came with the assessment, they've been fantastic in sharing their knowledge and experience and insights, and I think we're very privileged. For those that went on the assessment team, we're very privileged to enjoy that, and I think that privilege has continued tonight. One final thanks, and that's to Kerry, who helped fantastically in writing the assessment report. So big thanks to Kerry.